I'd like to welcome John Brunner from Aegis Mobile and Stefan Haller from the Campaign Registry. John, before you start your presentation, do you want to tell us what Aegis means? What's the origin of Aegis?
Oh, thank you very much. So Aegis is a Greek term. It was the shield of Zeus, and it had special power, protective powers. And so I did not name the company. The original founder and owner named the company when we took it over 10 years ago. It was already there. But anyway, and he used to loan it to, I guess, Athena, so she could go out and beat people up with it. So
pretty good.
Anyway.
All right, well, get started.
Actually, I need to sit there.
Yeah, you need to sit there.
You sit, no, you sit there. You sit there.
All
you
right,
sit there.
we're playing musical chairs.
Otherwise, we're creating this visual false positive.
But I want to be him.
All right. Now we've got that sorted.
So wait a minute, this is left to right. Okay.
Doesn't matter. Hi. We're here to talk about, what are we doing? Oh, security is awesome. The problem is people. Now, TCR, or Campaign Registry, hopefully most of you know who we are. We are basically connecting the dots in the 10DLC landscape in the US. And we have a registry, hence why it's called the Campaign Registry. We're not smart with names. We work with a number of people in the ecosystem to ensure that information and data is preserved for the businesses that are trying to send messages to their consumers. So as a registry, one of the key things we have to do is actually collect this data. We work with people like Aegis, we work with NetNumber, and collectively, and other companies in the ecosystem, we create a secure messaging environment. Is it perfect? No, because otherwise there would be no spam. There is still spam. But it's a lot better than, say, some of the things that are available in other mediums. So with TCR, a lot of people have spoken, I think for us it's something that we were talking about before. A lot of companies have come up here and they've spoken about things they would like to do, or things they're planning to do, or things that they think should be done. The difference is we've kind of done it. And with Aegis, we've done it at scale. So in the last year and a half, I'd probably say, John?
Yeah, less than 18 months.
Yeah. We have nearly 2 million brands that have been registered. We have almost an equal number of campaigns associated with those brands, so SMS messaging campaigns. We have nearly 1,000 campaign service providers signed up direct, and indirectly there are many more signed through their own organizations as resellers. And this has all been having to be done at scale. What was the number you gave, John, on the most that you validated in one day?
Verified.
Verified.
36,400 and something in a single day. Companies that registered were verified that they legally existed in the countries that they were from, and they were good standing. There were also background checks included in that number.
Right. So I'll move on to the presentation. I did that, didn't I? Yes. Oh, there we go. So as we said here, the Campaign Registry is a registry, and we register stuff. Collect and validate the data from CSPs. This is all about the brand that wants to send the message and the messaging campaign that the brand then wants to create to communicate with all of their opted-in providers and customers. And other details that we collect really fulfill the prior 2 points. What we are not, we're not a compliance house. We're not telling people how to be compliant. That is not our role. Our role is to make sure that they register and we validate the data in the fields that we have available so that they can be checked. And we're also not in the messaging part. So that is pretty critical and pretty important. Next slide, I think, is yours.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So who is Aegis? So Aegis actually is a compliance company. I've been doing it for 16 years in many different channels, starting in premium SMS, but includes things like location services, direct carrier billing, SMS messaging, 10DLC, identity platforms. But in this instance, we're talking about the US 10DLC market where millions of brands have registered and millions of campaigns have been registered. We're verifying them so that you have a verified sender or a known sender with traceback capabilities at scale. So interestingly, when data is automatically pushed through TCR's APIs for a brand registry, it automatically comes to us for a verification. In 3 seconds or less, we're pushing back that we have in fact verified that this company legally exists. And we're covering about 180 countries so far where these businesses are originating from. So I think what we want to do is start with the concept that there's value in known sender to a market. But secondly, there's greater value in being able to do this at scale so you can get the whole market involved, right? Everybody from Bob's Barbershop up to Barclays Bank. So it's about everybody's a verified sender for business to consumer messaging.
I like Bob.
You like Bob?
Yeah.
Good. He passed. So then the thought is, you can know who somebody is, but you also want to prevent bad actors from coming back that have been removed, so prevent whack-a-mole. You want to be able to figure out how 150 registered brands are working together under one ownership to create fraud and keep everything below the thresholds. And so, we have the ability to do the vetting and deeper analysis in a completely automated way, pulling roughly 80 data sources back globally to actually look at the behavioral history, the risk history of a brand. And in theory, if they're not matching against any of the bad guy databases, they're not matching against any kind of consumer fraud or financial embarrassment that would indicate risk of bringing them on, you can bring them on. But while you're bringing all this data on, you can then run analysis to say, well, these 42 companies are actually all related to each other. And they appear to have been registered through 42 different CSPs. What is going on here? And the fact that we have tagged their messages, we can now look at their behavior in aggregate and determine, if we need to do something about it. So knowing the who becomes extremely valuable. But the trick is, how do you do it at scale? How do you do it at low cost so that it doesn't impact the market? And how do you do it accurately when you're talking about a global market? And that's what we've actually been able to prove that we can do over the last 18 months.
So, where do the problems start? It starts with people entering information. They are always the problem. People don't listen. They don't read. They want you to hold their hand through everything. And the simplest questions deserve an encyclopedic answer. Hopefully, everybody has one of these. That's the dream. What we get is any element of those three. Fat fingers is a classic one. In fact, there was in our support systems, the business development team that I work in, we often get called in to answer some difficult customers. And there was one very difficult customer that was maintaining that we were very, very bad at the information we were collecting, that we were basically idiots, that our systems were really bad, and we just did not know what we were doing. And so I looked at the case. It just happened to be one that I sort of pulled up. And sure enough, they had their IRS letter, the letter that you get from the IRS that confirms your company and your registration and all the details that need to be entered into our systems. And for accurate, or to try and actually find the registered, to try and find and
verify
the, thank you, John, the actual brand, the actual company. And I looked at the letter and I looked at what had been entered and I saw there was a discrepancy. And I sent a very nice email back to this person at this company and said, you may want to just re-enter your EIN. I got a flaming email back that I was probably the worst person ever and that I obviously hadn't read any of the prior emails and that they had entered the information in absolutely correctly. And I very kindly pointed out in my response that they had entered 4 times the wrong information by reversing the last 2 numbers of the EIN. every time. And about 24 hours later, I just got an email back saying, thanks. And of course, it was verified in seconds.
Yeah, that's just right. So the other thing, though, that's really very important when you're trying to do these things at scale is when a request comes in to verify a company, we're going live against data sources out the back door of our systems, right? And trying to look up this information. And the reality is there is no system that does a lookup by a VAT tax ID, by a US tax ID, by a registry ID from Canada or whatever country it's from. Typically what you're doing is you're providing a business government issued ID with a legal name, and they're letting you know if you've got a match in their records, and then they give you information on that company as to its legal existence and if it's in good standing. And so, you know, people are kind of looking at you when they're putting in data and saying, okay, so last 2 digits were wrong. Why didn't you get this right? Well, we're doing 36,000 companies in a day. We cannot, you know, we're not going to get a match from any system if your last 2 numbers are reversed in that tax ID. Certainly not with any complete assurance when you're trying to do this completely automated without somebody looking at it. So, you know, it becomes very, very critical, you know, that you're getting good quality data if you want to do it at scale, at a low cost, right? With speed and accuracy. But, you know, sometimes it's hard as a customer to realize that, you know, this is what we're doing. We're not taking 3 days. If a person's looking at it, they can figure out, oh, the last 2 digits are, you know, reversed. You know, this should be fine. But the reality is that there are millions, well, thousands of companies that have the same name in a single market. And so you just cannot rely on bad data being submitted if you want to do this at a low cost. So it becomes very, very critical to have data quality to be able to achieve this. The second thing that's interesting with some government sources, and that's what we're trying to use for just about every country we're checking because they're authoritative. I don't want to use a global business subscription that's not relying on government sources. But when you use government sources or any source, sometimes when someone enters their information into the CSP's platform, it interfaces with TCR, it interfaces with us for verification. If it doesn't go through the first time, they keep hitting enter as a user. And what happens then is the government site thinks it's a hack attempt. And so they literally, for that combination of tax ID and legal name, they'll shut you off for 24 hours. Right? And so now we've got a different problem. You know, there's a slight mismatch of data that's being submitted that's inaccurate, and you've actually shut us down now to be able to look up that specific company for 24 hours by continually submitting wrong data. So, you know, just kind of getting that out to our public, you know, becomes very relevant. Now, keep in mind, these issues are a very small single percentage point, if you will, of issues that we face. But when you're talking about millions, it becomes tens of thousands, which
Exactly.
obviously is things that need to be worked.
Yep. So, as John sort of referred to, we introduced checks and balances, but in TCR, you know, that's validating fields, validating the length of fields. We're validating the entry in fields. But at the end of the day, we can't verify the information as only the user knows that information is correct. So it has to be, to your point, fast, efficient, accurate, and inexpensive. And what is it? You can actually pick 2 of those.
Sorry.
So that's where we go. The land of unicorns, when we get told that it has to go to those 4 things. John and I live there often. So we decided that one of the things we need to do is review all of these issues and offer different solutions. We came up with different solutions over a wine or 2.
Yeah. Or 3.
The first one was, you know, well, let's just take people out of the equation. And we just have the machines.
Mm-hmm.
Second solution was, well, let's take machines out of the equation. And then we just go back to self-attestation and the Stone Age. So then it was smart, not evil machine reviews and collaborative data validation, so that's behind the scenes to reduce friction. And this was inevitably where we've kind of ended up, and we're still scaling. The thing about anything, as you launch something, it's never going to be what you dreamt it was going to be. It's always going to morph into something else. So having done millions of these validations and verifications, both of us have tweaked our systems accordingly. The front end capturing, the data we're capturing, what we're communicating to our end users. We have, found every piece of every document that we put out is very rarely read. Or if it's read by somebody who actually has no effect on the data entry, but thinks it's a great document, but doesn't actually give it to the person who's actually entering the data to begin with. We have also found that doing a video, some sort of visual presentation of the release notes for our roadmap has a little bit more of an effect than if you just write something. So people will say, I didn't see that. I didn't read that. You didn't send it to me. It's like, yes, we did. And in fact, you confirmed you opened it 4 times. But you send them a video of somebody just talking about the roadmap with a display behind them, and it has a bigger impact. So we're looking at different ways to actually help people retain the data and actually understand what they have to put in, and actually try and guide people through data entry so that we can send more valued and validated data to somebody like Aegis to actually then verify. And the verification then comes back faster, the customer has a better experience, everyone's happy, we all go and have a drink, it's fantastic. So anyway, we'll now get on with actually how it actually all works today, and I'm going to hand this over to Ross.
Oh.
He's been interrupting a lot.
Oops. Yeah. You can't shut me up.
Who can sort of guide us through the next bit of it.
Okay. I have no idea how, but I seriously don't.
Okay. Well, let's
Give me a hand.
Yeah, let's talk about some things. So interestingly, certain countries like Canada can be very, very challenging for identity because they have multiple issued government IDs, and not every company has all of the government IDs. So they have local, provincial, and federal, if you will, tax IDs. And in that country, for example, the federal tax ID is really barely available. In other words, every source that you can find to do a lookup, maybe 20% of all companies that have a federal ID in Canada is accessible from a verification perspective. The government holds it tight. The registry ID, which is more of a provincial, is available very, very freely. Local IDs, not every company has them, right? So how do you get education out to the customers when you are required a tax ID and a legal name to verify that they legally exist, right? So you have a good trace back.
Right.
The education in that space becomes very, very difficult. I mean, it's difficult for me to understand it, and I face it every day as a company, right?
And it's also, what we find is that when we communicate this to the customers, taking Canada again as a great example, and we say to the customer, they say, this is all I've got. And we say, yeah, but as a registered company, you should also have this. Nope, we don't have that. Have you checked under the bed? Because it must be somewhere. Yeah. And they will swear blind they do not have it, in which case we have this limited piece of information to try and work on, to work backwards to try and find them, because they seem to have a registration. And it becomes frustrating for the customer because they believe they have the correct piece of information that validates who they are, that we can then verify. But under the authorized government-issued the databases that Aegis is going to, it's not there.
Well, we're going to everything that's available,
right,
that you can buy or go to publicly,
right,
and it's not there for
it's not there.
Of that.
So and sometimes it's a massive education piece because sometimes the terminology is different almost by the state.
Yes.
So what they call it, you have to then sort of go, oh, so even though it's known by this, by the federal government, colloquially it's known as this. So we then have to try and immerse ourselves in colloquialisms to be able to communicate with the end user to tell them what it is. And they go, oh, that? Oh, I didn't know you wanted that. It's like, for the last 3 weeks, we've been trying to communicate to you we needed something else. And now that we called it the right thing, you pull it right out and give it to us, and then you're verified in seconds. Again, it's that problem of the communication piece and people understanding what it is you're talking about, because you can't sometimes use the same terminologies that you would use. I mean, country to country it differs, that's a given. Okay. But within the country, it then differs how somebody is registering. In the US, even state by state, somebody could have a state registration which is different from their IRS registration, and it's called something different, although the intent is it's, you know, and we have to sort of try and understand, or make them understand, it's the document that you sent to an official that told you you were now registered.
Yeah.
Whatever
So Stefan, do you have a sort of a encyclopedia of colloquial, you know, terminology for all these pieces of information?
Yes.
Yeah.
we
I fed you the answer.
we have had to create one, and we've been actually putting together a list of colloquial responses in emails that we get from once we've told people what they should be getting.
And is this sort of automated? All of this goes out automatically, or?
It's published.
Yeah.
It's published. But the problem with publishing is that nobody reads it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We come to the same problem, is that we put the information out there. People then come and say, we haven't been registered, and we're coming back unverified. And we say, why are we unverified? It's like, did you read the document that we have published on our website in 5 different places? That is really obvious. And did you read the hover over that actually came when you actually were entering the data? There's a hover over that tells you, again, what you should be doing, or references a link that you can open up right there. You don't have to log out or do anything. And people go, oh, what is that? I was like, let me send it to you if you will read it.
Yeah. And do you do a video for that as well, or does that work?
Those are being done.
Yeah.
But yes.
That's a tricky one to do.
It is very tricky to do, because at the end of the day, we don't want to, you know, we're not doing this to waste somebody's time. The whole point about registration is that understanding who you are and what you're doing gives transparent information to the network, so that everybody can understand what they should be expecting to go across any carrier's network and receive and arrive at the consumers.
Now you kind of ask, you know, why can't you build the most robust thing in the world? And obviously we're on our way to that. Right now I would say it is one of the most robust processes that exists, but we're also only charging a few dollars, you know, for these verifications on a global basis, which quite frankly is pretty darn low, but we did that on purpose for the
because
channel.
Because the market would not accept a higher fee.
Exactly.
So it was like we could charge more money for the registration process and take longer and get it really
perfect.
Well, yeah.
We could take the bad data and still figure it out, you know.
But like I say before on the other slides, what we had to do was we had to do it fast, inexpensively, accurately.
Yeah.
And at
very
scale.
accurately.
And at scale.
Yeah. So there are other challenges too that occur, and that is we see a lot of brand new companies, right? These companies are 3, 4 months old, 2 months old, 6 months old, and governments haven't updated their databases, especially coming out of COVID. So you've got legally registered companies, but when we go to these government databases, they're not in there.
Right.
And they're not in there because the government hasn't put them in there yet. And so what do? Well, we've created also a very open environment where people can appeal. They can literally contact for help.
Right.
And so obviously
and then they can supply a copy of the official documentation.
And they provide the documentation.
Yeah. So there is a way that they, you know, just because you haven't been found, we can still use documentation, official documentation, that to at least to say, well, we know that the government hasn't put you in their database, but we recognize that you actually have this official documentation. So you know, none of this is perfect.
Yep. Yeah. And then other challenges are we're trying to verify, are you a political candidate? Are you running for office and you want to do your messaging for political reasons? Or are you a nonprofit? Are you a charity, right? In which case...
What are sort of the the different factors for, let's say, political or, you know, nonprofit?
Well, so with political, we actually have to reach out and directly verify that the candidate is the person that's requesting this access. So it's one thing to verify you have a company that's legally registered in the country that they're from and you've got a valid business record. The second step is, are you who you say you are? So with political candidates, we have processes that are automated into the system that can send an email directly to the registered email for that political candidate with a QR code, and they put in a PIN, and we've now not only verified you legally are registered as a political candidate, but you are also that candidate. or you represent that candidate. We're also integrated with the mail system and FedEx, where we can send the QR codes out, by mail, but obviously that takes longer. And now we're enhancing that too to create analytics around that email domain, for example. Okay, so this company owns this email domain, but this domain is associated with spam and phishing and other kinds of fraud. And so we can put the risk analysis on it so that the carriers can make decisions. We may have verified you, but we actually are tying you to bad messaging behavior based on the URL on your email. But anyway, so getting this stuff, again, at scale, automated and low cost, is what we're really trying to achieve. Yeah. I think we've made fantastic progress over the last 18 months. We're just up here talking about what are some of the challenges of getting there, because I'm not sure people actually see what's going on behind the scenes sometimes with a very, very small percentage. But when you're talking millions, a small percentage is tens of thousands. Right?
It sounds like you definitely need like a sort of multi-pronged approach in terms of education, in terms of collaboration.
Yeah. Well, and you also have to have multi-tiers of support too, right? Because I mean, the idea is, can I get 98% fully automated? Can I get of the 2%, can I get 1% of those 90% automated? Of the half of the 1%, can I get those 80% automated? Right, so that you can reduce the amount of time that it's sitting in processing for the customers and get them to market.
Also with automation,
and the cost.
Yeah, I was going to say, also with automation, you get a reduction in cost, which then delivers on it has to be inexpensive.
Yeah. So how do you, again, every process is going to require some sort of intervention, but we keep attacking it as a partnership around, can we automate at least part of that problem, right? So that we can minimize the amount that needs to actually be looked at.
And as you guys have obviously, advanced and learned more about this, I assume the bad actors are also learning new tricks all the time. What are you kind of seeing on that front, with sort of bad actors?
Well, it's interesting because we are able to see registered companies that are committing bad acts. As they're coming through the network and they're being picked up, we see it. They're either being reported by customers or they're being identified in the pattern analytics. But what's really great is the fact that we've registered them as a company is we've got a whole bunch of data on that company. And so when we do a shutdown, we're also looking across all registrants to see what other companies are actually associated with this company that are running. But we're also then saying, okay, this company's got URL links that they're using to phish. And since we already know the company, we can go find the 20,000 URLs that they own. And we can give them all to our friends that are adaptive that were here in Proofpoint and the other filter companies. So that as they start rotating through what they own, we already know what they're going to put in there
and
at a time.
One of the key things that happens in the registration point is that in the campaign registration, there is a sample message that's being requested. The sample message is being used by the spam companies out there, and amongst other data fields that we have, to check what's happening in market. So TCR is not in market, but when the message hits a carrier, the spam companies there will be looking, first of all, at the numbers that have been associated with that campaign, which is part of the process of getting your campaign registered. So in NetNumber, there is a campaign ID that's sent to NetNumber. The phone numbers are associated with that campaign ID. And that means that we already know what are the authenticated registered senders for that whole campaign. So number one, if somebody's trying to be that campaign and those numbers is coming from a number that is not registered, it raises a flag. Second thing is that if there is a campaign that goes bad, then you can look at every other campaign that brand has, because that's associated with that brand. You can see all the numbers that are associated with that campaign and then all the numbers that are associated with that brand to assess whether this is a brand that has gone bad or it's just a single campaign that has gone bad. Plus, when you're looking at the sample message and you're and you're looking at the in-market, and the spam companies look at the in-market, they can say, well, they registered a 2FA campaign. They gave a sample message of what the 2FA campaign should look like. So utilizing AI, they can then do an analysis on how close to sample message is in market and raise a flag again for somebody to review it to decide whether or not this is actually a spam or a campaign that's gone wrong, or the fact that somebody may have changed their campaign from what they registered to something else, and it's just, there's that
In which
sample
case they
message.
should re-register it.
Right,
as a new-
exactly. They should register it. They should go in and, if they've changed their campaign, then change the information in the registry so that people, again, they know who you are, they know what you're doing. And there's no such thing as, if you register once and then you just can go and do whatever the hell you want. No. You have to update your information if you change what you're doing, as long as it's legitimate and compliant.
As you scaled up, I mean, of course, efficiency is key. And so what are the most important sort of data points that you're looking for that really tell you what you need to know?
Golden triangle.
That's what we call it.
It's the golden triangle of information. It is the name of the company with possibly a DBA, if they have a DBA, right, trading as. The EIN and the registered company address.
The tax ID.
The tax ID.
Whatever country they're
Sorry,
from.
yes, the tax
Yeah.
ID.
The
and
government ID.
Yes, and the registered company address. And a lot of people, often, we had this, and we still have this, people will look at where they're working and go, this is the company address. It's like, no. That's the place where you work.
That's where you work.
That's
Yeah.
the local office. It is not the address which might be in Delaware or somebody, of the actual registration of the company. And the company may not be called, John's Famous Pizza Company. It may be called, the Awesome Pizza Company, Inc., trading as John's Famous Pizza Company. So again, it's accuracy is important where we're going to government databases.
Yeah, as you remember, I'm not aware of any government database where you actually just put in a government-issued ID and they give you back a yes, that's real, and here's the legal name. You actually have to put in both, and they'll tell you if you got it right. And if you got it wrong, they just say, we don't show that as accurate. Doesn't exist. So it's, you'd think, if you could just look up by number and get a name back, it would be a lot easier, but they're really verifying you've got a good match.
Yeah. What do you think of, if I was to say, mobile number is the ultimate digital identifier, compared to, let's say, email? What would your reply to that be?
The problem with phone numbers, so one of the things that we would like to do is to be able to send a text message to a phone number and get that PIN validation that you are who you say you are when you register, right? But what we have to do is do lookups in companies like NetNumber and Somos and other companies to figure out the historical behavior of that phone number. Mm-hmm. Is it associated with bad acts? Is it a leased number? When's the last time it changed hands? When's the last time it ported? Right, but it doesn't have who owns it. And so, again, what I'm trying to do is contact a verified owner of an email or a phone number or an address that's a legal representative of that company, right? To do the direct verification. So phone number, until we have the ability to verify the actual owner. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of registered call center phone numbers, because we work in that space too, verifying phone numbers for call centers, but that's a very small fraction of all phone numbers that exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if anyone has better information on this. Where's Catalan? But anyway.
No one's shooting up their hand, but yeah. Do you think blockchain has any role in all of this?
Now you're talking about self-sovereign digital identity, right?
Yeah.
And Aegis and TCR have been involved in that. We've been talking with GLIFE, the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation that creates unique identities for banks, right? And they're actually trying to verify an individual person and create what's called the virtual LEI. Yeah. But it's interesting because in the telecom industry, we're involved in many different value-added channels, and they exist, right? There's all kinds of different ways that carriers are opening up their networks with value-added services. And so from our perspective, what we'd love to get to is kind of the self-sovereign, digital wallet, if you will. The role that Aegis wants to play is to put credentials in there. So are you authorized in this country, in this network, for this carrier to do messaging? Yes. Are you authorized for RCS? If you are, what's the logo that's been verified that you own as a credential that you can use for RCS? Or you have logo calling coming out as well, right? So the branded calling, so when it comes in. So are you registered for US Stir Shaken, for those of you that are familiar with that? Yes. Has your logo been verified that you can do a branded calling? So that wallet for a single company can have all kinds of credentials in it that allow businesses to do the omni-channel, if you will, of services that are out there. Because what we've learned doing background checks for 16 years as a company on businesses and intercepting live transactions and compliance activities and registering campaigns and all that good stuff is that there are different requirements depending on the channel that's being operated on. We're heavily involved in location services where the mobile app is enhanced by triangulation of the cell towers, right? Well, that's some pretty confidential data, so we do pretty deep digging on those companies before they're allowed to put this data on their mobile app. It's a lot different than just verifying you legally exist so you can do A to P messaging. So when I say credentials, they're going to be different depending on the channel that you operate in.
And there is, of course, blockchain 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the best thing about blockchain 2.0 is?
What?
There's no blockchain.
Now, there are a number of different companies. I think in the last MEF conference, we
Yes.
had two companies that were in Miami. They were debating, which digital, solution is the best.
Yeah.
It was fun to watch.
Do you think that organizations like MEF have a role to play in this verification process?
Yeah, so what's really interesting to me is that the association...
Wait. You said
a role
that MEF would have in the verification process, or...
Oh, yeah, do you think...
Well, I'm going to take that more generically. So
Okay.
I think MEF is in a great position to provide a governance model, right? So we're putting together policies and standards that everybody's signing and all that stuff. I talked about Glyph earlier, which literally is doing, identity for every bank in the world that wants to do cross-country banking. They've created a governance model, and the governance model says this is how verification will work, and this is how you get certified to do that verification work. And oh, by the way, we have a centralized database that will be maintained for all LEI numbers that have been issued.
Right.
And here's the whole governance model. And so to me, groups like MEF and CTIA and CWTA and I3, all these groups that are playing this model of bringing us all together has a role to drive that governance model of how do we want to make this thing work for an industry, for a globe, globally, or whatever it might be. So absolutely, because it's all of us that can drive what that governance model looks like.
Yeah. Stefan, you mentioned the angry customer anecdote. Do you think that that sort of thing is inevitable with this sort of process? Is there anything that could have been done better? And also, do you think that the response, is there any way to kind of mitigate it when it does happen?
I think it's inevitable. No matter what you do, there's always be somebody that will, they'll find the bug you never found.
Yeah.
They will press the button in a certain sequence that you never thought anybody would or could.
It's the ultimate test.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Normally they give me the stuff to try and break because I always tend to break something. But it is inevitable. So understanding that inevitability, all you can do is try and ensure that you communicate as best you possibly can. Because the quality of the data going in is only going to result in the output, say, that John's and Aegis are going to give back. If there's only one of two options, you're either verified or you're unverified. Nobody wants to have the unverified because it takes time then to be verified by trying to explain. You put a lot of resources into trying to explain why and what you have to do. So I think there are certain organizations that have probably done it better than others. I think in the US, when you come to the tax season, companies such as TurboTax that kind of say, from your document that says box 3, 4, 5, 6, put it right here, box 3, 4, 5, 6. It's like, it's kind of, you dumb it down as much as you can and go, if you do this, you're good. And people still muck that up. They still get that wrong. But at least you're trying to point people to very, very, very visual options. And I think 60% of what we retain is what we see, not what we hear.
Yeah.
So this sort of visual element is something that I think we could improve upon generally and try and give people those visual indicators rather than just the written indicators.
Yeah.
As companies, agility is the most important thing too, especially when launching something like this. The folks that are governing what they want in the market, changing requirements,
Right.
Realizing that there's a small hole that needs to be changed in technology that's being used, et cetera. To make it stick, which I think we've done, you've got to be responsive with your technology and your people and your customer support. And then we even have an appeals process because you've got to have an open process. People have got to be able to petition and say, you know, what's going on here? You can't just be a sealed box and nobody can see what's on the inside.
We have the OSHIP process.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Did you
another
say SHIP?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
it's a Band-Aid.
Yeah, okay.
That's the other thing is that you should always ensure that you do have not, you know, the plan A is to fix it and you put it into your roadmap and however long that roadmap is to sort of roll it out and to make sure that it's coded and everyone's going to be able to code against it. But you have to have plan B, C, and D, which is this is really important to fix now. How do we do it now? And ensure that you have agility within the teams to be able to respond to that. Hopefully it's not every day or every week or every month, and that you can be responsive.
Yeah. John, I think Aegis are in 2 continents now, I believe.
Yes.
So you mentioned Canada was a particularly kind of tricky place. It was quite difficult there. What are some of the other like sort of idiosyncrasies of different regions and different problems you faced in different regions?
Well, I guess I would say there are some countries that just don't have databases available. Like I said, I think we've been successful at roughly 180 countries where businesses come from those countries that we can verify them. You know, so far. So for us, we're always looking for more data sources, not just where we're successful, but where we're not successful. But what you need to have is the ability to kick it out to a person if you've got a country that just doesn't expose information. And we've been looking at companies from Vietnam and Korea and places like that for many, many years. And so if you can't do it automated, you have to have a process because you can't tell a company no because of what country they're from. So if you can't get there, you've got to have processes. If you can't get there automated, you've got to have processes to get there manually for those few that come through. To your point, we operate in Australia, Canada, and the US from an operations perspective, but our reach from a compliance monitoring, vetting, and the rest of our products and services is actually anything that's digitally available in the world we can get to. That's what we do. We collect data from the market and the markets, or we buy it. But
we should see if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Because we've got 3 minutes.
Does anyone have any questions? We got 2. Wait for the mic just behind you. Yeah. Can you say your name and your company as well?
Hi, my name is Ira Cohen from MMD Smart. How do you deal with different languages on the forums? Let's say, I don't know, Arabic or Chinese or Cyrillic languages that fill out the form, different languages?
Actually, most of those we have been able to deal with because we're actually going against databases that are written in the same language.
Yeah, so
we've been fairly lucky with.
We accept all languages.
Yeah.
So if we get the forms and the forms are written in different languages, we can just send them on to TCR?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a U.S. company, I'd rather not you submit it in an Arabic language. But, you know.
If the country of origination is, you know,
in the messaging samples?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. I think James had a question.
Hello, James.
Good evening.
Here. Good. A quick question about domain names. So many of the people in this room, they're companies. They are expert at numbers, number ranges, number verifications. It's often said that our mobile phone numbers now have just as much importance, or possibly even more importance when it comes to verifying us as individuals, as our ID cards, national ID cards. If you had one in the UK, we don't, or our passports. So numbers are very important, but what about domain names? The world of domain names is very much like the Wild West mixed with a very, very good disaster movie. It's an absolute supreme disaster where I could pitch up to any domain name registrar, get my credit card out, buy 10,000 names as close to DHL or FedEx or whatever brand I want to pick as possible. No one would question me. No one would ask me why I want them, the purpose of them, and I could pay and I could do as much damage as I wanted with those domain names. So does anybody know here what on earth is going on in the world of domain names? Because a company's domain name is so synonymous with their identity as well, and that just seems totally uncharted waters.
You've been pushing that agenda because it's not being done. So what we're doing, what we're implementing though for the campaign registry is at least what we can do is it may say, for example, imtmobile.com, right? But when we run that against the multiple data sources, we find out that that domain is actually registered in China. It's very likely it's not T-Mobile, right? So it's not, and if they register as T-Mobile, but they register their domain as, I am T-Mobile, that's the most that we can do right now. But in terms of changing the industry so that they're verifying up front, I'd be happy to sell to them if you've got friends. So.
Great. So we're running up against clock. Any quick question? No?
Any other questions?
No? Oh, no questions. Okay. Do you want to give us closing remarks before we finish up?
No, just thank you all for listening to all of our data talk today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much to Aegis for sponsoring the session. We're going to have a coffee break now, and then there's just 2 more sessions, and then drinks and food. So don't go anywhere.
Exactly. So plenty of time for networking now. We reconvene in 45 minutes at 4:30, so please do stay on. Relax and enjoy, because we constantly keep getting told we love your content. Give us a bit more time for networking. And that we are doing. So see you back here at 4:30. Thank you.